We were talking earlier about the difference in the Rapide, which was the touring model, and the Shadow, which is on the bench there, which is the sports, out-and-out sports model. Right, this is obviously a restored Rapide, similar to my one. This has got smaller carburetors. They're a lot smaller. This is a proper remote float carburetor for it. I'll go and get one from the Shadow. Here we go. One in my hand. Can you physically see the size of the carburetor? You know, I don't have to tell you what it is in millimetres, but you can physically see that's a bigger carburetor, and this is the Shadow carburetor. So it had much larger carburetors. The engine was in a higher state of tune as well. And when you start the bike up, you start a Rapide up, and you start a Shadow, the Shadow just barks. The Rapide is a little bit quieter and a little bit what I'd call mellow, a little bit more mellow. Another thing is, this is the standard Rapide. It has a little speedo here, which is a small standard chronometric speedo. Reads to a mere 120 miles an hour. Now this bike will be more than capable of doing 115 mile an hour plus. So it's not a slow bike by any means. Another thing we mentioned, if we pan over here onto this, this is a unrestored Rapide which we have. What we call a barn find. I bought it non-running, got it running. If we have a look at the drums here, this is a standard drum. They've got no fins on them. Can you see that? There's no fins because they were adequate as they were. The fins, as we mentioned earlier, were to cool the heating brake drum and to stop brake fade. Also, it doesn't have the air scoops on, albeit the air scoops on the Shadow were optional extra. So they've been added on from the factory with the alloy wheels and everything. But the actual bike, if you have a look at it, it's got a silver engine. Which it's a Rapide, it's got a silver engine. The looks on the Black Shadow, hence the Black Shadow, it was that all black engine and that huge 5-inch speedo. The Rapide is still it's a Rapide, it's still a Vincent 1000, but the Shadow was the road burner. You know, to have a Black Shadow, you were the king basically. We mentioned earlier about the difference between the Shadow in the workshop there and the Rapide. They're basically the same motorcycle. You know, when they were being built, it wasn't until they had an order in, they'd decide whether it was going to be a Rapide or a Shadow. You know, it's the same rolling sashay. If we have a look here, it's the same wheels, forks, frame, same engine. All it is, the Shadow, you know, and I don't want to detract from a Shadow. The Rapide isn't a lesser bike. It's just in a lesser state of tune. It's like saying having a difference between a Triumph Bonneville, which would have been the Shadow equivalent, or a Triumph Trophy, which would have been, you know, the less tuned, state of tune, single carburetor Triumph version, you know. Both of these bikes obviously have twin carburetors because they're twin cylinders. Another thing is that the Rapide would have the chrome handlebars, but if you see opposed to the Black Shadow, which has the black handlebars. But saying that now, a lot of Rapides have been built to full Shadow spec anyway. People like the look of the black engine. They like the black handlebars, and a lot of Rapides will have the big clock because they're being replicated now. You can buy reproduction ones. So unless you look, you know the bike, you know, and it hasn't got that B on the engine, it's not really a Black Shadow. But it doesn't detract, you know, anything from a Rapide, because I do more miles on my Rapide than I do on the Shadow. I prefer to ride the Rapide. It's a softer bike, more mellow bike, and more forgiving. The Shadow is a beast. It literally is, you know, it is a beast, and you've got to master it. You can feel that it's more power, it sounds more powerful, and you tend to ride it more aggressively, which I don't think is a good thing on these roads with all the traffic and everything. But I love my Shadow with my heart, but if I couldn't have my Shadow, I'm just as happy to have a Rapide as well.